My name is Alex Arnold, and welcome to Moroni Standard. This channel exists because I personally got tired of my faith being treated like something fragile that couldn't survive contact with hard questions. So, I'm a Latter-day Saint, or a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm also an Army veteran and a former athletic competitor in multiple sports at the amateur and professional level, and I'm someone who came to this faith not through a warm feeling in a church pew, but by pulling on different historical and academic threads until they led somewhere that I didn't expect. So every claim on this channel gets sourced, every objection gets steel-manned honestly, and I'll always tell you directly when something is my interpretation versus established scholarship, because that distinction matters, and too many people just totally skip over that. Moroni Standard, the name of the channel, is named after an ancient prophet warrior. Not me, I'm not Moroni, and I'm certainly not the Standard. You probably heard the name Moroni from the Book of Mormon, but this is not the same Moroni that you see on top of the temples. So this is a Moroni that was a captain who raised a banner called the Title of Liberty to rally people to defend what was true. So that's the spirit of the channel. Not trying to be defensive, not angry, just unwilling to back down from any kind of evidence. This channel is designed for Latter-day Saints who want real answers to hard questions, for the critics who want honest engagement, and for anyone just curious enough to follow the evidence. So here's the question that I want to open with, and I want you to actually sit with it before I say anything else. Why didn't the Jews recognize Jesus as their Messiah? Think about it. They had been waiting for centuries. They had scripture, they had prophecy, and they had an entire religious tradition built around the expectation of a coming deliverer. And then Jesus of Nazareth shows up, and the most scripturally educated people in the world had him executed. The standard answer is that they were looking for a conquering king, and Jesus came as a servant. And that's partially true. Jesus himself said in Luke chapter 24 that everything written about him in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms had to be fulfilled. He said that the entire Hebrew scriptural tradition pointed to him. So, if the most educated Bible readers in the world couldn't see it, either they were catastrophically spiritually blind, or the text that they were reading no longer said what they originally said. Today, we're going to examine the second possibility. We're going to look at who edited the Hebrew scriptures, what they removed, which communities kept the older texts, and why those specific communities were the ones that recognized Jesus first. By the time we're done, we're going to talk about why recovering what was lost requires more than just a better translation. Let's go ahead and get into it. The way this is going to work is I'm going to kind of steel-man the questions that would be associated with this based on the first statement, and we'll try to build from there. So the first question after what I just said might be, why is the Jewish rejection of Jesus a serious theological problem and not just a moral failure? Well, most Christians treat the Jewish rejection of Jesus as a spiritual failure. The hard hearts, the love of tradition over God, and the looking for the wrong kind of Messiah. There is a partial truth in that framing, but it sidesteps something that deserves a direct answer. Jesus himself said in Luke chapter 24 that beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to his disciples the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. In Luke chapter 24, verse 44, he says that everything written about him in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms had to be fulfilled. His explicit claim was that the entire Hebrew scriptural tradition pointed to him. Not a handful of ambiguous passages or mysterious verses. All of it, the whole thing, all of the Old Testament. So here's the actual problem. If the scriptures pointed clearly to Jesus, and if the most scripturally educated people in the world were immersed in those scriptures their entire lives, why didn't they see it? The answer of spiritual stubbornness doesn't fully answer that. Spiritually stubborn people still read words on a page. If the words clearly pointed to Jesus, the establishment would have had to actively argue against what the text said, not simply fail to notice it. The more historically interesting answer is that by the time Jesus arrived, the text the establishment was reading had been through a process of editing and exclusion that removed the very tradition that he was most explicitly drawing from. Not by a single conspiracy and not all at once, but gradually, institutionally, and with documented evidence. So to understand what got removed and why, we have to go back several centuries before Jesus to a school of editors whose work shaped the Hebrew Bible that we read today, and whose theological agenda had consequences that rippled all the way into the first century. So the next group that I'm going to talk about are the Deuteronomists. And your question might be, who were the Deuteronomists and what did they actually do to the scriptures? So the Deuteronomists were a school of scribes, priests, and theologians operating primarily during the reign of King Josiah of Judah, roughly 640 to 609 BC, with continued activity through the Babylonian exile that followed. The name comes from the book of Deuteronomy, and their editorial work is visible across what scholars call the Deuteronomistic history, the books of Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. Richard Elliott Friedman documented this in his book, Who Wrote the Bible. Israel Finkelstein and Neil Asher Silberman laid out the archaeological and textual case in The Bible Unearthed. Frank Moore Cross of Harvard built the foundational academic framework for understanding it. This is all mainstream academic consensus, not LDS scholars or just fringe theories, okay? Now, what they did broadly was reshape the older Israelite tradition to serve a specific theological program. They centralized worship at Jerusalem, had exclusive loyalty to Yahweh, and the systematic elimination of different older traditions that complicated the agenda. And here's why this matters for today's topic specifically. The older Israelite religion, what scholars call First Temple religion, practiced before Josiah's reforms, included a theological framework called the Divine Council. The idea that Yahweh presided over an assembly of divine beings, that there were heavenly figures called the sons of God who participated in cosmic governance, and that the coming deliverer of Israel would be a pre-existent heavenly being among those gods. The Deuteronomistic editing flattened and removed that divine council theology, and the theology is exactly what made sense of a pre-existent divine heavenly Messiah, which is precisely what Jesus claimed to be. When that framework was edited out of the mainstream canon, the figure that Jesus was describing became much harder for people immersed in that canon to actually recognize. Now, your next question might be, before we get to what was excluded, what's the basic problem with how the Bible was transmitted to us? Now, the Bible transmission problem is pretty foundational, and I want you to take time with this because everything else builds on top of this. The Bible was written by various authors over more than 1,000 years, from writings associated with Moses around 1400 BC through the New Testament letters and Gospels completed around 100 AD. None of the original manuscripts survive. Not one. We don't have any. We have copies of copies made by hand across 15 centuries before the printing press existed. That's what we have. The copies were made across multiple languages, Old Testament primarily in Hebrew, New Testament in Greek, then translated into Latin, Syriac, Coptic, and eventually English, with each step introducing opportunities for meaning to shift and for the errors to accumulate. The people doing the copying worked under varying conditions of training, time, and theological motivation. The errors accumulated in predictable ways as well. Letters confused for similar-looking letters, lines skipped when two phrases looked alike, marginal notes incorporated into the main text by later copyists who assumed they were the original, and some of the changes were intentional, like scribes who believed the text contained an error and then they corrected it, or who added clarifying language to support a theological position. The textual critics, like the scholars whose discipline is comparing manuscripts to construct the most likely original, have cataloged over 400,000 variant readings across New Testament manuscripts alone. That number is larger than the New Testament itself. Bruce Metzger of Princeton Theological Seminary, one of the most respected New Testament scholars of the 20th century and a committed Christian, used the word corruption in the title of his foundational work on the subject. That's his word, not mine. Corruption. Now, with 400,000 variants, the next question might be how much of that actually matters. And the honest answer is that the vast majority are pretty minor, not a big deal. Spelling differences, word order variations, and synonyms substituted for one another. The scholars estimate roughly 99% of the variants fall into that category and don't actually affect any meaning. But That leaves approximately 4,000 significant variants, and within that group, several of them affect major doctrines and central narratives. Those are the ones worth knowing specifically, because those are the ones that are in your Bible right now. First, let's talk about John chapter 5, verse 7. In the King James Version, it reads, "For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one." That is the most explicitly Trinitarian verse in the entire New Testament. However, it does not appear in any Greek manuscript before the 15th century. Erasmus excluded it from his original Greek New Testament compilation because he couldn't find it in any manuscripts. He was pressured to include it after a Greek manuscript conveniently appeared, now known to be a 16th century forgery. The King James translators retained it anyway. Modern translations either omit it or footnote it as absent from early manuscripts. The story of the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8 is one of the most beloved passages in the Gospels, but it doesn't appear in the Codex Sinaiticus or the Codex Vaticanicus, the two oldest complete New Testament manuscripts that we have. It surfaces in different manuscripts in different locations. The original ending of Mark stops at chapter 16, verse 8. And the familiar longer ending with serpent handling and speaking in tongues was also added later, and it's absent from the earliest manuscripts. These are clearly not just spelling variations. These are pretty significant passages that help shape Christian doctrine, and the evidence shows that they were not in the original text. So, next question, who decided which books belong in the Bible, and how was that decision made? Well, it wasn't decided all at once, or cleanly, or by any divine declaration. It was decided over centuries through councils, disputes, and judgment calls made by human beings with theological agendas and different political pressures. The word canon simply means the official list of books accepted as scripture. For the first several centuries of Christianity, there was no universally agreed upon canon. Different communities used different books. The New Testament canon was not stabilized until the 4th and 5th century councils, and even then, different Christian traditions reached different conclusions that they maintain to this day. The Catholics used 73 books, the Hebrew Old Testament plus 7 additional books called the Deuterocanonical books, plus the 27-book New Testament. Protestants use 66 books. Martin Luther removed those 7 in the 16th century, partly because they contained passages supporting Catholic practices that he was rejecting. Eastern Orthodox churches use 78 to 81 books, depending on the tradition. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church uses 81 or more, including books that no Western tradition includes. These are literally all different Bibles. So when someone appeals to the Bible as a singular, stable, self-defining authority, they're glossing over a canon that was assembled by human councils making judgment calls, and different councils made different calls. The Bible itself does not contain a list of which books should be in the Bible. That requires an authority outside of the text, which means that the Protestant doctrine of sola scriptura, Scripture alone as the final authority, has a big foundational problem before you even open the book. Next question, what specific texts were excluded, and why does it matter for the Messiah? The Bible we have refers to books that no longer exist in any canon. For example, the book of Jasher is mentioned in Joshua chapter 10, verse 13. The book of the Wars of the Lord appears in Numbers chapter 21, verse 14. Paul references a letter to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9 that predates what we call 1 Corinthians, but it didn't survive. The biblical authors themselves were well aware of larger scriptural tradition than what actually made it through the selection process. What we have is a curated collection, and the curation was done by people with agendas. The most important excluded text for this conversation, to me, is 1 Enoch, specifically the section called the Parables of Enoch, covering chapters 37 through 71. In those chapters, Enoch receives a vision of a figure called the Son of Man, a pre-existent heavenly being who dwells with God before creation, who will sit on the throne of glory, who will judge the wicked and vindicate the righteous, whose name was known before the sun and stars were made. This is not just a conquering earthly king motif. This is an explicitly divine, pre-existent cosmic figure. And Jesus used this exact title, Son of Man, to refer to himself more than any other designation in the Gospels, 80 times across the four Gospels. When he tells the high priest at his trial that they will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven, he's not making a vague poetic statement. He's invoking a specific figure from a specific tradition. The audience that knew that tradition understood exactly what he was claiming to be. The mainstream establishment, working from a canon that had been marginalizing that tradition for centuries, largely did not. The next question, how do we know First Enoch is actually old enough to matter and not just later invention? Well, the physical evidence answers this directly. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, beginning in 1947, ancient manuscripts hidden in caves near the Dead Sea, dated from roughly 250 BC to 68 AD, 11 manuscripts of First Enoch were among them. For comparison, there are 8 manuscripts of Ezekiel in the same collection. The community that produced those scrolls treated Enoch as a text of significant scriptural importance, and this places substantial portions of First Enoch in the hands of a Jewish community firmly before Jesus was born. The New Testament letter of Jude directly quotes First Enoch as prophecy, using the word prophesied, which is not how you cite cultural reference material. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest continuous Christian communities in existence, has always included First Enoch in its canon and never removed it. The academic argument that the Parables of Enoch specifically must postdate Jesus rests primarily on their theological precision about a divine pre-existent Son of Man. The reasoning being that a text this specific about the Messiah must have been composed after Christianity existed to inspire it. That's totally circular reasoning. If you begin with the premise that detailed messianic prophecy is impossible before the Messiah arrived, then any text containing it must be dated after him, regardless of what the physical evidence shows. That is an ideological assumption dressed up as methodology, and it is exactly the assumption that Jesus himself would have rejected, since he explicitly said that all of the prophets testified of him. So we have a tradition describing a pre-existent divine Messiah. We have evidence that tradition was preserved in texts used by specific Jewish communities before Jesus. And we have a pattern of which communities recognized Jesus and which ones didn't. So let me show you the pattern because it's not super subtle. Which communities actually recognized Jesus and what did they have in common? Well, the communities that were the most receptive to Jesus were disproportionately communities that had maintained older scriptural traditions outside or alongside the mainline Pharisaic canon. The Essenes at Qumran preserved First Enoch, Jubilees, the Book of Giants, and other apocalyptic texts that the Jerusalem establishment was marginalizing. The early followers in Galilee were geographically and culturally distant from the temple institution and its standardized canon. The Ethiopian Jewish community, who converted to Christianity early and thoroughly, had never removed Enoch from their scriptures. The Samaritans maintained older versions of the Torah that diverged from the version that the Jerusalem priesthood standardized. So, the communities closest to the centralized temple-controlled, institutionally edited canon were the communities most resistant to Jesus' claims. The communities that preserved older and broader apocalyptic traditions were the communities that were the most receptive. That is a pattern with real explanatory power. It suggests that the question of why Jews didn't recognize their Messiah has a more specific and more interesting answer than just spiritual failure alone. Some Jewish communities reading older texts that preserve the divine council theology and the pre-existent Son of Man tradition were looking for exactly the figure that Jesus claimed to be. And those were the communities that recognized him. The communities that were reading the edited, institutionally standardized version largely didn't recognize him. So next question, even setting aside what was removed from the canon, doesn't the translation itself change what the surviving text actually says? Yes, and this is a layer that most people never even think about because they only encounter the Bible in translation. Translation is not a neutral mechanical process. There is no perfect word-for-word equivalence between ancient Hebrew or Greek and modern English. and every translator makes interpretive choices shaped by their theological commitments, their manuscript choices, and their doctrinal tradition that they're working with. Those choices all have real consequences for what the text appears to say. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14 is one of the clearest examples. The Hebrew word in that verse is alma, which means a young woman of marriageable age. It does not specifically mean a virgin. The Hebrew word for virgin is betula. When the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek in the Septuagint, the translators rendered alma as parthenos, which does mean virgin. Matthew chapter 1 verse 23 quotes the Greek version when applying the prophecy to Jesus' birth. Both the King James Version and modern translations follow the Greek and translate it as virgin, a translation choice that was driven by theological application rather than the Hebrew original. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's an actual documented choice with a significant doctrinal consequence, and it illustrates this point. By the time you're reading your English Bible, you've already inherited layers of interpretive decisions made by translators working centuries ago within their own theological framework. So, what does all of this have to do with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? More than most people realize, and I want to explain very carefully. The foundational LDS claim is that God restored his gospel through a prophet named Joseph Smith beginning in 1820. For that claim to be necessary, two things have to be true. Something was genuinely lost, and restoration through a prophet is how God has always responded to that kind of loss. Everything that we've covered today is evidence for the first half of that claim. The divine council theology that made sense of a pre-existent heavenly Messiah was systematically edited out of the mainstream Hebrew canon. The texts that preserved it most explicitly were marginalized and excluded. The communities that held on to the fuller tradition were the communities that recognized Jesus. That is what the apostasy actually looks like. Not one big dramatic moment of collapse, but a gradual institutional process of narrowing that makes the original picture progressively harder to see. The Book of Mormon enters this conversation in a specific and historically significant way. It was compiled by a prophet named Mormon from records kept by a group of Israelites who left Jerusalem around 600 BC, right in the middle of the Deuteronomistic editing period, before the Babylonian exile completed the transformation of Israelite religion. The Christology in the Book of Mormon, the theology about who Jesus is, describes him as pre-existent, divine, the God of the Old Testament who would take on flesh. That matches the older pre-Deuteronomistic tradition more closely than it matches what survived in the edited Hebrew canon. Joseph Smith produced that record in 1829. The Dead Sea Scrolls came in 1947. The academic scholarship connecting divine council theology to early Israelite religion was developed across the 20th century. The Book of Mormon was describing the older tradition before the scholarship even existed to confirm that the tradition had even been there. So, next question, couldn't Joseph Smith just have assembled all this from the Bible that he already had? Well, the specific claims don't really support that conclusion. 1 Nephi chapter 13, presented within the Book of Mormon as a vision given to Nephi around 600 BC, describes a great and abominable church taking away from the gospel of the Lamb many parts that are plain and most precious, before the record went forth to the Gentile nations. That is a specific prediction, that the spiritual record was deliberately narrowed by an institutional actor with theological motivation, and that the result was widespread spiritual confusion among people who still had a Bible but had lost the clarity that the original contained. Joseph Smith made that claim in 1830. Codex Sinaiticus wasn't discovered until 1844. The Dead Sea Scrolls came in 1947. The mainstream popular scholarship documenting manuscript corruption, Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, was published in 2005. The entire field of academic textual criticism that documents exactly what 1 Nephi 13 describes took more than a century after the Book of Mormon to develop into its current form. Joseph Smith either predicted what the scholars would spend their careers confirming, or the text is just what it claims to be. I personally know which explanation I find more credible, and now I've told you why. But your next question might be, why can't better scholarship and better translations recover what was lost? Why do we still need living prophets? Because the problem that we've spent this entire episode documenting is not fundamentally a textual problem. It's an authority problem. The question of which texts are scripture, which readings are authentic, and which interpretations are correct, these cannot be resolved by the texts themselves, because the texts are what's in dispute. You cannot use the canon to establish the canon. Every person who opens a Bible is already making judgments about which translation to trust, which manuscript family is the most reliable, and which theological framework to apply. And every one of those judgments depends on an authority outside of the text. The Protestant Reformation demonstrates this clearly. Luther, Calvin, and all the other reformers were serious and scripturally rigorous people working from the same biblical texts. They produced not unity, but fragmentation. 40,000 Christian denominations today, each reading the same 66 books and reaching different conclusions on baptism, salvation, the nature of God, and nearly everything else that matters. More careful interpretation of a corrupted and incomplete text does not produce certainty, it produces more denominations. Latter-day Saints believe that the answer is what God has always used when the texts become corrupted and authority becomes confused: a prophet. Amos chapter 3 verse 7 says that God will do nothing without revealing his secret to his servants the prophets. That pattern runs throughout the entire biblical record. Moses was not a reformer of existing Egyptian religion. Isaiah was not trying to reinterpret corrupted texts. Lehi left Jerusalem precisely because the institutional religion of his day had drifted from what God actually required. Joseph Smith was not the first person to notice that Christianity had serious problems. He was, Latter-day Saints believe, the one called to do something about it that scholarship alone could never accomplish. He was called to restore the authority, the ordinances, the plain teachings, and the continuing revelation that the institutional editing had taken away. We still have living prophets today for the exact same reason, because the authority problem doesn't solve itself. And a God who spoke to Moses and Isaiah and Lehi did not suddenly go silent after Jesus died. So here's where we've landed, and I want to be really precise about what the evidence shows and what it doesn't. The Jewish rejection of Jesus was not simply a case of spiritually hard people missing an obvious fulfillment. It was, at least in substantial part, the predictable result of a centuries-long editorial process that marginalized the scriptural tradition that Jesus was most explicitly drawing from. The divine council theology, the framework that described a pre-existent heavenly divine Messiah, was systematically edited out of the mainstream Hebrew canon by the Deuteronomistic school. The texts that preserved the tradition most fully, including the Parables of Enoch, were excluded from the standardized canon. The communities that preserved those older texts were disproportionately the communities that recognized Jesus. The communities closest to the institutionally edited canon were the communities that were the most resistant. That is a historically supported pattern, not a theological assertion. And the scholars who documented the editorial process, like Friedman, Finkelstein, Silberman, and Cross, none of those are LDS. For Latter-day Saints watching this is the foundation for one of the most important conversations that you'll have in defending your faith. When someone asks why God needed to restore anything, today's episode is the answer. This is what apostasy looks like. Not dramatic collapse, but gradual institutional narrowing that removes the plain and precious things that 1 Nephi chapter 13 described, more than a century before the scholarship that confirmed the mechanism even existed. When someone asks why living prophets are necessary, that answer is also here. 400,000 manuscript variants and 40,000 Christian denominations are what you get when you try to recover divine truth from a corrupted text without divine authority guiding the recovery. The restoration wasn't an overreaction. It was the documented, historically grounded, necessary answer to a documented, historically grounded problem. For Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish viewers engaging critically, the scholars that I cited are not LDS. The manuscript evidence is physical and verifiable. The canon differences between your tradition and the others are observable today. You can count the books. The circular methodology used to date the Parables of Enoch as post-Christian is a real academic problem that non-LDS scholars have identified independently. I'm not asking you to accept the restoration, but I am asking you to engage the evidence honestly, because dismissing the Jewish rejection of Jesus as a simple spiritual failure doesn't survive contact with the history of what happened to the texts that they were reading. And for anyone who came here simply curious about what Latter-day Saints actually believe, here's the short version. We believe God revealed truth clearly in the beginning. We believe human institutions narrowed that truth over time through editing, exclusion, and the gradual loss of prophetic authority. Not always maliciously, but consistently and with documented results. We believe the communities that preserved the older, fuller tradition were the communities that recognized the Messiah when he came. We believe that God answered the problem of institutional narrowing the same way that he always has, by calling a prophet, restoring what was lost, and providing a second witness that the first witness was never meant to stand alone. That's what the restoration is. That's what this channel is here to make the case for. All of my sources are in the description. Go check everyone yourself. I'll see you next time. I'm Alex Arnold, and this is Moroni Standard.